Welcome to the Circular Economy Coalition for Europe, CEC for Europe, a pan-European network of researchers and scientists, and we are all striving to support the European institutions in their endeavor to create a circular economy. We want to support these institutions with evidence-based data and facts, because we want a fact-based circular economy. Our topic today is the circular economy from an EU perspective. And if we take a look at the bigger picture, we can see that Europe imports 1.8 billion tons of raw materials, fuels, and goods every year. At the same time, we export some 600 million, only 1/3. A part of the surplus leaves us as off-gas from incineration or into the wastewater system. Some wastes remain in our countries, but the biggest part of these goods and of the surplus remains in use in our man-made environment. So we accumulate. This flow of materials and this accumulation is not a bad thing. It is just the expression of a global disparity between our raw material stocks and the demand for raw materials. And as a society, we developed a toolbox to compensate for this disparity, for the uneven distribution of raw materials. And let's take a brief look at these tools. First, we have geology. Well, this is a given. We hardly can change where the geogenic stocks occur and where we can dig for ores or for oil. So we developed economic tools, trade. Give me what I need and I will pay for you. I will have a barter. We developed diplomacy, long-term contracts between countries to sustain the raw material basis. And ultimately, we can see that even war is a tool to secure resources. And finally, we have technology in three aspects. Resource efficiency, use less resources for your target or have a higher output from a given amount of resources. Substitution of critical, hazardous or scarce raw materials. And finally, recycling. Nowadays, we have a fourth discipline of tools, sociology. We have to question our demand for services and goods, the way we purchase, we decide on purchases, the way we use goods, and finally, the potential of sharing economy. You probably know all these instruments, and they are commonplace in many EU documents, from our raw materials initiatives to the roadmap for a resource-efficient Europe. And the same is true for the European Circular Economy package as issued on 2nd of December 2015. Here we can see the political goals of the European Circular Economy package. We want environmental protection, we want a secure supply of raw materials for our industry, and we want to support economic benefit and growth. Well, these are political terms, but in business language, that means we need effectiveness and efficiency. As experts, dear colleagues, you're all familiar with the 5 layers of the European hierarchy for waste management. beginning at the top with prevention of waste and reuse and recycling and energy recovery or other forms of recovery, and finally disposal as the least preferred option, a landfill. But don't get me wrong, we still need landfills as a final sink for our residues. But if these are the priorities of the EU with respect to waste management, statistics tell us a different story. This chart, dear colleagues, shows you the share of landfilling for the treatment of post-consumer wastes, of municipal solid waste in the EU member states. As we can see from this chart, 13 member states of the European Union still landfill more than 50% of their municipal solid waste, which is a waste of resources in itself. And 15 member states have more than 30% of landfilling. This is quite contradictory to the hierarchy we just saw. So in the circular economy package, the European Union strives at a handful of targets. One is to divert wastes from landfills. In 2030, there's a maximum of 10% in each and every member state that should be disposed of at controlled landfills, much more than we have today. The European Parliament even votes for 5% maximum landfill in the European Union. The recycling of municipal solid waste shall be increased to 65% in 2030, and according to the Parliament, even 70%. For recycling, it's 75%, and so on and so on. So we see almost a race to increase recycling and recovery from municipal solid waste. Is this the right target? Well, I mentioned effectiveness and efficiency, and sometimes we see an obsession to raise targets as opposed to find the right targets. There's a conflict between maximum and optimum. We all know that recycling needs energy for collection, for sorting, for conditioning, for transport. So there's a tipping point, and after a certain value of recycling, the savings are not enough to support recycling anymore, the savings in raw materials. So recycling rates close to 70, 80, 90% bear the risk of overshooting. So our message is we should find the optimum of recycling and not the maximum in order to achieve environmental protection while saving resources. When we compare the recycling rates of the European member states, we can see that we have a union of many speeds. We have front runners, Germany, Austria, Belgium, and other member states, and we have laggards. And prior to increasing the targets even further, we should harmonize the recycling levels within the European Union, because the current situation is a distortion of competition, and it's the wrong incentive towards member states with low waste treatment costs, and that deviates waste from recycling, not something we want to see in the Union. Recycling and recovery targets and even landfill bans for municipal solid waste are important things. They're important instruments towards a circular economy. But we should not forget that municipal solid waste pertains to only some 7 to 10% of the total waste generation in the European Union. We should not forget that the majority of wastes occur in industrial businesses and operations, in the construction business, in the demolition business. And in my opinion, the most important part of the circular economy package is the action plan. The action plan, a very readable document, lists in 7 chapters 54 important areas of activity. It's not an action plan yet. It's neither action nor a plan, but it's a very comprehensive list of areas we should address in the near future to achieve a circular economy. And it goes all along the value chain, from product design and production to consumption, waste management. It puts the emphasis on 5 important waste streams where you can of course find critical raw materials, plastics, biogenic waste, demolition and construction waste, and others. And it goes to finance, innovation and monitoring, because we need better data for a sound resource management. Circular economy goes far beyond waste management. Here you can see in a chart that is based on thoughts of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation how a circular economy could look like. And you will notice instantly it's not just one circle or one loop, it's a cascade actually. We try to keep on various stages functionalities, parts, materials and energy in the loop, in the circle. So we can go from the maintenance and repair services to the reuse of parts, to the refurbishment, and then finally to recycling or energy recovery. But let's not forget there will always be losses and leakages. There is no 100% efficiency, not even in recycling. On the other hand, on the left side, you see eco-design. What does that mean? It means a conscious construction of services and goods, resource efficient, repair friendly, reuse friendly, and finally with a high functionality and longevity from the viewpoint of the user. As a supporting element, you will need logistics. Logistics we do not have yet in place, and we still have to develop in order to make these circles and loops truly work. I mentioned data, and data is an important basis for planning a circular economy. I will give you one example to show you, to demonstrate you how misleading waste management data can be. Let's take a look at plastics. And the example is Austria in a given year, 2010. The market input is something like 1 million tons of plastics in this year. The most frequent use for plastics is, as you can easily see, packaging. 28%, 280,000 tons. So what happens with these plastic packagings? As we can see, almost every single ton ends up in the waste management business and is recovered or recycled, either as a raw material or as a refuse-derived fuel. And only a tiny portion at the very top remains in use longer than 1 year or still ends up somewhere on a landfill. So we can handle plastic packagings. It's not a challenge anymore. It's a daily operation. Second example, construction. The second most important area of application of plastics. Think of window frames, think of pipes and hoses and geotextiles and all sorts of things. 250,000 tons. And to our all surprise, only 20% of these 250,000 tons end up in waste management. Where's the rest? Well, I gave you the answer at the very beginning. The rest is still in use. It's in buildings around us. It's where we live, where we work. And it will become waste. It will be our challenge in 10 or 50 years. But it's not reflected in the waste management data of today. The look at waste management data is a look into the past. And when we want to design a circular economy, we have to look into the future, and we need the proper data for that. waste management data are outdated in this context. When we want to design a truly sustainable circular economy, we have to take a look at the full picture. The tiny green square here in this chart represents, on average, municipal solid waste per capita in Europe. 500 kilograms, half a ton. We already know that the total amount of waste generated by industry, by the construction business, is 10 times bigger. Fine, 5 tons. So this is the scope of the circular economy package and of the action plan. And while we statistically generate 5 tons of waste, we produce 10 tons of goods that remain in use. The mobile phone in your pocket, the suit you're wearing, the car, the subway, the airplane, the buildings around us. These are the stocks we create, we increase year after year after year. And because we have been doing so over generations, we already have a rucksack of 400 tons per capita. These are raw materials that are here and not somewhere else in South Africa, in Latin America, or in Southeast Asia. These are raw materials we can exploit. The downside, colleagues, is we don't know where they are. We don't know their chemical-physical composition, the matrix they are embedded in. We don't know when these stocks will become wastes and will be available as secondary resources, and we even don't know which technologies and logistics we will then need to use these secondary resources. This is an enormous field of research, and we can all feel proud to be a part of this venture. When we think of a circular economy, we have to admit that a circle is a bit romantic. It's an image, but it's a bit misleading, probably. You can test yourselves. Take a sheet of paper, take a pen and draw a circle. When you do it properly, you will end up at the starting point, at the origin. Now do the same. Take a sheet of paper, try to draw a circle, and pull the paper in one direction while you're drawing. You will end up with a spiral, with a helix, because this operation is the factor of time. The world is not the same when our resources in our anthropogenic stocks reappear as raw materials. You will hardly notice a difference when you take a look at fast-moving consumer goods, like packaging. They are in the recycling loop a couple of months later, or in newsprint, at paper. But when you look at cars, at industrial machinery, or at buildings, it can be years or centuries even. So we have to factor in time, and we move away not only from a linear economy to a circular economy, we have to move even further from a static circle to a dynamic helix, factoring in the effects of time. Dear colleagues, to conclude, the circular economy is an enormous possibility for waste management and a fascinating area of research for the waste management sector, for our academics. But let's not forget that this is not the full scope of services we provide to society. In other parts of the world, with other levels of development, waste management is extremely important to prevent diseases, to secure public health, to pertain hygiene in conurbations and agglomerations. So when we apply circular economy principles, let's not forget that we have to be aware of the full picture. In terms of its scope, the paradigm shift towards a circular economy is on a par with the energy transition towards a low-carbon society or the fourth industrial revolution. And political decisions of that magnitude require a sound and sufficient empirical and scientific basis. This is what CEC for Europe works for.